Okay, now we're going to discuss Chapter 12 of Decision Making Group Interaction, Achieving Quality by Patton and Downs. In this chapter, we're going to discuss quality groups in the 21st century. Now, I want to put out a little caveat because we've noticed some of the information that was presented may seem a bit passé or antiquated, older, and at the time that this book was written in 2003, the landscape looked far different. For us to prepare for a landscape that we don't know how much is going to change over the next 10, 20 years, we have to be amenable to those changes and look forward to it and embrace those changes as they come and not be fearful of them. Dimensions of the future. Our prime task in the future, unlike that in the past, will not be to deal with the similar, or even with increases in the similar, but to adjust to a world where the conditions are different than similar. They could be foreign, and what we're looking at with the interactivity and technology of the future could be having us doing away with the keyboard, speaking to, clear screens on the wall. Everything that we see in science fiction of today could become reality of tomorrow, and that could be the way that we interact with one another. The rate and magnitude of change, we need to develop new strategies for living with change, anticipating problems, designing creative alternatives. We need to be flexible to those things that come in the way of electronic information, because as it increases, it can be an overload. It can create an anxiety for people, and that anxiety stems from the anticipation of change and the fear of it. Now, the meanings of change. For the harried and the harassed, for the people that are really scared of it, the change represents more pressure, more things, a more pessimistic view of the world. For the bored, change may create excitement. And for those people that embrace it, it could be an ever-changing horizon, a chance to climb and do better in the world. Now, the magnitude of change, more change has absolute no value. If you ascribe to an optimistic or a pessimistic view of change, it just simply doesn't fit. It's not either good or bad. It just is. We must improve our odds at anticipating problems and plan our responses. The worst crises are those that are unforeseen. So we plan for eventualities, but we don't fear change. No longer is it possible to be separate or isolated from other people. What goes on in any one place, in some way, affects every place. And we can see that through our interactivity through technology and the bombardment at times of media. Self-sufficiency in our society is diminished. It has gone down, but it seems like in the last 5 or 6 years there's a resurgence. There's the people that are interested in dropping out of society again, which was so prevalent in the 60s, to tune out and go back to Mother Earth and do that sort of thing. But to interact in our society, we understand that dependency has increased, and there's a tendency towards more regulation. There's a continuing escalation of human aspirations. In some places in this world, we are all painfully aware that there isn't enough food or drinking water, but we understand that people look for more satisfying lives. We all have aspirations, and that's longing for food, medical care, a higher standard of living, a right to personal dignity, to political autonomy, and religious worship freedom. We've gone from a society or a world of mere longing to expecting. In the latter part of the 20th century, hopes and wishes were replaced by demands and insistencies. We have 2-day shipping on just about everything now. So we want to talk about 3 phases of development. How to play, how to win, and how to keep the game fair. Now, with our interrelation and our increased presence, whether that be in social media or our online presence, we understand in the past that political aspirations were under scrutiny for being rigged, and other social games being rigged against minorities and the sexes. So we need to be cognizant of unfair advantages and go back to the 3rd phase of development, which is keeping the game fair. A projected future of groups. There are 3 possible directions. Let's wait, watch, and see what happens. This is no answer at all. This is inactivity, and it just watches the world go by. We can escalate our controls, we can escalate our efforts at control and regulation. But this isn't a long-term answer. People desire to be free. They don't desire to have more laws, restrictions on their personal freedoms. And then Patton and Downs offer another solution. We can start trying to reinvent human nature, the way we interact with one another, the way we treat one another. And this is a viable answer. Now, this is something that I can speak on. Bureaucracy and its culture are incompatible with new information age organization. Now, being a public servant for the last 24 years, I understand bureaucracy, and I understand how slowly that laws can be proposed and changed, ratified, enacted, and then enforced. It is not a time-conscious project. It is a very long process. And in this information age, time is a critical factor. There is a model for providing command, control, and communication. And these things need to be recast in this new age. Rules must be replaced by judgment and action. This happens a lot where an individual has their own decision-making prowess, and they're afforded a certain amount of latitude to be able to make those decisions on the fly, as it were. That people cannot wait for these decisions, so they must act in the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. And lastly, bureaucracy must be replaced by self-informing and self-correcting systems. I'm not certain if that will be anytime soon. There is a lot of mechanisms put in place by bureaucracy that the practice takes its name by bureau of drawers, all compartmentalized. So there could be socks in one, there could be ties in another, and these drawers operate succinctly from the wardrobe or from the dresser, in that these compartments are part of the whole but are separate. And largely our society is created, at least governmentally, in these compartmentalized departments, organizations that don't seem to collaborate with one another, and information transference is very slow. A diminishing part of bureaucracy may speed information transfer, but to do without bureaucracy would be changing the way that we've lived for at least 200 years. A projected future of groups continued. Organizations must either change with the times or be left behind. And this quote from Pattons and Downs on page 166 of your text: digital capabilities are creating new ways of expressing, interpreting, and knowing. Clearly, new does not always mean better. And this is true. That's what I was just stating about bureaucracy. We do understand innovation, but we don't want to release what has worked either until we can integrate new ideas with old ideas to change the landscape of what we're looking at. Interprofessional communication, a means to quality. Professionals who can communicate and work in collaboration. Listen to that word again. From chapter 11, we spoke about collaboration. With professionals from other fields have a greater probability of developing innovations needed to solve some of the world's most complex problems. I agree. A good example of this happened in benchmark testing in teaching. Moreover, it happened in programs like No Child Left Behind. We learned quite a bit by involving other government agencies in teaching practices. Now, a great many educators think that this was a negative process that was introduced to hamstring their efforts with students. And standardizing education in a one-size-fits-all paradigm for students was not beneficial to them. But we see where sociologists have become involved in teaching practices to break the school-to-prison pipeline, and those individuals have stepped forward to produce what they call restorative justice or positive behavior intervention and supports into school districts to keep students in chairs learning longer rather than excluding them from the classroom experience. So these people collaborated on keeping students in school and reducing our dependence on incarceration for students that just didn't fit in. Moving along. Interpersonal communication may well be the basis for new educational paradigm within the 21st century. Most certainly. You're listening to my lecture on either a tablet, laptop, or desktop computer, or even on your television set. And the way we're going to school now, the way that we're interacting can be at the speed of light, and we can share our ideas and opinions, and we come together to provide education, to provide greater service than what we could limited to a specific number of students within a specific classroom on a specific university campus. It's an exciting time. Interprofessional communication continued. The crux of interpersonal communication involves us to listen, understand, and then act together, which means that we have to be open to communication. Now, your book goes into the Malcolm Baldrige Awards, and it gives specific examples in different fields for total quality management. And this is something that was talked about in previous chapters of the book. The awards were provided for teamwork, principles of total quality management, and those principles being cutting costs, solving problems, and increasing efficiencies. Should you have the time, please read those scenarios. They're wonderful, and there were wonderful things happening during the time that this book was written. Building quality decision-making groups. A group needs to be cohesive, committed, and involved. And these groups, at the time of the writing of this book, were rare. We network nowadays a little bit better than what we did before. I think the change in technology, the ever-advancing abilities of it, have allowed us to interact better with people globally. And these changes have allowed us to be more cohesive, more committed, and more involved, if not impassioned, about the things that we are interested in. And they're at the tip of your fingers, whether that be social media, whether that be, video websites like YouTube, to become informed. Our news outlets are largely transitioning to this medium so that we as a community can become involved quicker. And I look at some of the changes here, and you can understand, these were at the cusp of technology at the time, but changes in interacting and conducting business. One of the things that they elaborate on is CD-ROMs, and walking through Best Buy, it's difficult to find CD-ROMs anymore. I think you can still find them at Staples, but most interaction that way, or most data storage, is either done in the cloud or done on a flash drive now. But it's still very interesting to see this. The internet and video conferencing. Quality leadership. Now, this quote was attributed to Katherine Heskett within the book. And they describe competent leadership is without visible, committed, and skilled leaders, most groups will fall far short of expectations. And I agree. I absolutely agree. You have to be present to be able to lead people. You have to be committed to your organization and the mission of that organization, whether those values and beliefs are something you need to ascribe to. The values, beliefs, and mission statement of an organization to be able to move forward. And then it kind of takes care of itself. You become better at what you do if you have that strong foundation and your values align with what that organization is all about. Quality data gathering. Now, we spoke about data in the last chapter and how important it is that it not be skewed and it not be false data. The process must help the group ask the right questions and find the data that are relevant and critical. Very important. In a section that's attributed to Mintzberg, hard data is used to stimulate thinking and then tap into the wisdom of the group participants. I couldn't agree more. Quality group communication skills. Individual intellect may supersede that of the collective. You may have a few smart people in the group. Those people provide excellent resources to the group to be able to move forward. And the group needs to weigh out all opinions. And those individuals come together. It's just they can't be the dominant voice in the group. They can be collaborators. They can become leaders, but their opinions shouldn't supersede that of the other group members. Each should be weighed equally and seen what information is most relevant. In the quote from page 171, groups and the individuals in them must have feedback on productive behaviors and an atmosphere where participants can think aloud without fear of criticism and judgment. So that means that each member is valued and their opinion is also valued. No trust, no relationship. Attributed to Franklin Covey, the fundamental reason that most quality initiatives do not work is because the lack of trust in the culture, in the relationships between people. Organizations which rely on trust as a principal means of control are more effective, more creative, more fun, and cheaper to operate. As a piece of advice that I received when I was younger by my uncle, it says if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I would like to pass that wisdom on to you, and I think it shoehorns nicely into this subject. Your values, your beliefs Relationships are paramount to trust. Trust is the key. When we're talking about trust, we're talking about respect, honesty, and loyalty. Trust grows through the flow of communication, broader participation in decision-making, more evenly distributed power structures where each individual has a say. That's the end of chapter 12. I want to thank you for hanging in with us through an entire textbook of information that we've imparted to you. I'm very proud of what your work product has looked like thus far, and I want to thank you again for letting me be a part of your learning.